So we just finished talking about the importance of planning for your service requests before creating them. Now we're going to utilize this knowledge and plan for our service requests. Now let me start by giving you the user story. As a Remedyforce administrator, you've been approached by the manager of the provisioning department, and she asks you if it would be possible to create a hardware-software request form that can be made visible to everyone in self-service. Now, since provisioning is not your area of expertise, you start asking her questions about what's needed on the form, the design aspect, what to call the service, and what fields would be needed in the templates. And you're greeted with a look of confusion. Now, you realize this is not going to be as easy as expected. Now, this is very common, so you decide to pass along a service request workbook to the provisioning manager that can better assist her in understanding what's needed in order to successfully plan and create the service request. You explain to her that this will not only assist you in the creation of the request, but will also help her in organizing her own service catalog. It may also assist her with any analytics that she may need later. So you both review the document together, and a short time later, she returns with the following. So now let's review this workbook, and as a note, I'm going to attach a blank version of this workbook to the videos as well, so you can feel free to utilize them, make edits to them, and use that as your templates if you wanted to. So the first thing we see is the actual name of the request definition. She wants us to call it hardware or software request, and in brackets standard, and that's because she's looking at creating a second one called executive. Alright, so there basically two different request definitions here. We're going to focus on the standard for now. She wants us to add a description, and for category we're following the I want to format, so we're going to be calling this category order hardware or software. It kind of flows with the I want to. We're not going to have a subcategory. She does want us to add instructions to the request definition. And here are some prompt questions, the type of field that we're going to be creating, and the possible answers to those questions, and any notes, so if it's required or non-required or anything else. And we're going to review these questions when we actually create the request definition. So we're going to move on a little further here. So let's look at the backend requirements. For the service name, we're going to be calling this one end user services. And the reason for that is I'm going to just flip over to my org. We currently have a system or setup, like we mentioned earlier, about keeping things consistent. Our service that we're using is called end user services. And as for the offerings, it's basically broken down either by departments or the type of services. So in keeping with the same format, we're going to call the service end user services. This will be a technical service. We have the service owner, the hours, the review date. Now there's several other fields that you can populate when you create your service, but in this example for today we're just going to be using these fields here. For the subservice, this subservice will be called provisioning standard, and obviously for the executive it's most likely provisioning executive. Same owner, the hours, the date. So now we have a section here for an SLA, so service level agreement. She does want one. Her notes say, 10 business days to complete, and a notification is to go out to the provisioning team as a reminder after 50% of the time has elapsed. Alright, so we're going to have to create this SLA, and there will be an approval. And the approval steps for this particular request is the manager is the first approver, then the provisioning team will need to approve it to be sure that it's supported software or hardware, and once it's approved, task 1 is then sent to the provisioning team to order the hardware software, and once task 1 is complete, task 2 is sent to the IT support team to install the hardware software. So now let's look at the templates. As for templates, we have the one incident template and I believe 4 other task templates. Now we're going to cover these more in detail when we create them, but just to kind of give you a quick idea of the template here, what it looks like. So we have the name of the template here, then we have the field that we're going to add on the template with its value, along with any additional notes. And we'll do that to all the other templates as well. We have the 4 task templates. So now let's take this information and come up with the process overview of this request, all the while remembering the SLA and the approval steps. So first, the SRD will be submitted by a client in self-service, and from there, the SLA will start. Once it's submitted, the SLA is going to start. The request will be locked and awaiting for approval, and then the status in the queue field will have a value of pending approval, and this will be done through the template. Next, the first approval notification is sent out to the manager for approval. Now, once the manager approves it, the second approval will go out to the provisioning team for their approval. Now, at any given time, either one of these two groups can deny the request, and then when they do so, the SRD will change to canceled. Now, going back to the second approval, if the provisioning team do approve the request, the SRD status is then updated to approved and assigned to the provisioning queue. And also at that same time, the first task is generated and assigned to the provisioning queue as well. Now, once the provisioning team complete the first task, the second task is created and sent to the IT support queue. And IT support will work that task, and when they're done, they'll change the status to completed. Now, from a client perspective, this process is basically completed. They've received their hardware and their software, and they're good to go. At this point, the provisioning team, if they're monitoring this SRD, they realize that the task is completed. Now they can go ahead and close the SRD, and that's done as well. But you may want to add an option. You may want to add an automated process that basically, once that last task is completed, a notification can be sent out to the provisioning team so they can update that SRD and change the status to completed, which at that point will complete the SLA. This is an automated process that you can add as opposed to just relying on the provisioning team to monitor a dashboard or monitor their SRD and tickets every so often. This way here they get notified, they can just go ahead and close the SRD. So now let's take all of this and put it together at a high level. We're going to be calling the service end user services. We then have the service offering, and we have a standard one that we saw, 10 days business SLA, and the executive one, which was a 3-day SLA. And the request definitions, we just saw the one here, the hardware software request form. But there's also a hardware software upgrade that they may want to add later, or another hardware software request that might be different for the executive offering. Now today, we're going to focus on the hardware software request under the standard 10-day business SLA. So let's begin.